Hello Year 7. Today you're going to be going through the poem Municipal Gum by Oodgeroo Noonuccal. We're going to read through the poem together, talk about some of the key ideas that Noonuccal was presenting, and look at her language choice through language techniques. So let's start off with a reading of the poem. Gum tree in the city, hard bitumen around your feet. Rather you should be in the cool world of leafy forest halls and wild bird calls. Here you seems to me like that poor cart horse, castrated, broken, a thing wronged, strapped and buckled, its hell prolonged, whose hung head and listless mane express its hopelessness. Municipal Gum, it is dolorous to see you thus, set in your black grass of bitumen. Oh, fellow citizen, what have they done to us? So obviously we can see that's an extremely emotional poem. We can see that Noonuccal has been very careful and deliberate in her word choice, which is what we see commonly across poetry because it is that short, concise form. We can also see that as an audience, we're clearly positioned to take a sympathetic attitude towards the tree. We feel bad for that tree. We think it's poor condition. We look at the language that's used to describe it and make us feel some kind of sympathy and empathy for the tree. So let's take a look closely at the poem overall. So first of all, we can see there is personification in this poem. So Noonuccal personifies the tree, again, so it's able to give it that human qualities so that the readers of this poem can feel those sense of wrongdoing, that sense of harm, the sense of the tree as being in the wrong place and where it shouldn't be. And it helps to build that sympathy. Now, overall, this poem is an extended metaphor. There are a range of metaphors throughout the poem, but obviously this extended metaphor is trying to explain what has been inflicted on Indigenous Australians since the arrival of white European culture. So we know that when Europeans arrived, they assumed that they would own the land, that they had control and they had their right to that land because they had claimed it. But we know that this is very different to the attitude that Indigenous Australians held towards the land, that the land was entrusted to their care, that they had to preserve it, they had to look after it, they had to live alongside it, not destroy it. And that's really coming through in this poem with that contrast between the leafy forests that we would expect a tree to belong in, especially in our Australian landscape, as opposed to a gum tree sitting in the middle of a city surrounded by bitumen. And that's a common image that you might be able to envision in places around Australia where you have been, even in your local area, seeing a tree in a place that is not its natural setting. So if we move further and look at this idea of connotation. Now, connotation means that words are used and we have an understanding of those words as a reader. So our mind shifts to our understanding of that word to create more depth and understanding or feelings within that. So some of the words that have been highlighted in terms of connotation, they do bring about certain images. So there's idea of the leafy forests. We tend to think of lush, beautiful places. But then we have that, opposed with things like castrated, broken. So this poor cart horse, in those senses of, it's hell. Now, there's a few words here that you may not be familiar with. So there's mine and dolorous. So mine is actually a way of talking about disease. So a sense that whose hung head and listless disease expressed. So it's full of disease, that it's, sick, that it's unwell. So it's really trying to emphasize those points. And then we have the dolorous, which is a word meaning great sorrow or distress. So if we rephrase that line, municipal gum, it is in great distress, or it is, I am in great distress, or I am in great sorrow to see you in this way, set in your black grass of bitumen. And that's also interesting there, the black grass. It's completely opposite to what we would think of when we think of grass. So Noonuccal's really trying to put these images in our mind that this is not where the tree should be. Now, we also have a couple of similes. So you seem to me like that poor cart horse. So really trying to emphasize some of these images. Now, if we think of a cart horse, it is a horse that's used to pull quite heavy loads on its own. So it's a single horse with a cart, and typically they are used to carry quite heavy things that, humans wouldn't actually be able to carry themselves. But we tend to think of that pack horse, too much weight, it's weighed down, it's being held down, it's struggling. Now, the last technique that I want to emphasize is the rhetorical question at the end. And that is, what have they done to us? Now, clearly that's bringing it together. So she's trying to establish a connection between the us and the tree. And that really brings about that personification, that tree is one of them. Because if we think about the Indigenous Australian attitude towards the land, and they feel it's in that strong connection, it's in their care, that the impact of the European culture and the arrival of those people has really disrupted that connection that they had. So you're going to discuss more of this poem with your class teacher, but hopefully this just gives you an understanding of what the poem is about, some of the key ideas. But really, I want you to strongly think about how you are positioned as a reader to understand these experiences and understand what they have gone through and how that changes your perspective or makes you think differently, or challenges you, or it makes your mind, and your thoughts move to a place that makes you consider something you maybe hadn't thought of before. And that's a really important point in terms of poetry, is that the audience's response and where it sends their mind, what it makes them think about, is very important.